All right, and we are live Monday night Novak News. It's Bidhan and
Harry.
yes,
We're doing it.
Yes, we're talking about which type of property market is performing the best in 2025. Commercial
or residential.
Yep, stay tuned and we will be right with you. All right, guys, welcome. So, how's the day been, Harry? Been good?
Oh, busy.
Busy, right?
Probably one of the busiest days of my career today.
Interesting.
Yeah, man, it's all happening today.
Yes, I think everyone's slowly getting back to business. We are seeing lots of activities happening. Lots of properties are coming on. Yeah, like things are happening and heated up. We normally wait until 26th of Jan, Australia Day, before things starts to kind of get on going. Yeah,
property market's definitely starting to settle and starting to heat up in 2025.
Yes.
So early doors, but done. Early
definitely.
doors.
So I thought we'll take this chance and talk about it before it actually happens.
Yeah. And talk about what's already happened. Too.
Exactly.
Only a couple of weeks into the new year, and so much has gone on.
Definitely. So we're talking about the performance of property types because there are like a zillion types.
Yeah.
But we'll narrow it down to residential and commercial, and subdivide them into a strata and freehold.
And but Dan, you'll cover more of the commercial today.
Yes.
I'll cover more of the residential,
Definitely.
and then we'll talk about the two in depth and which one's been performing better in recent years and going into 2025.
Exactly, because if you have some, like let's say $1 million of cash, where do you want to invest? Do you want to go residential, commercial? Do you want to have a shop with a really long-term tenant? Do you want a residential, then you want to retire in later?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want strata? Do you want a unit? Do you want a house? So let's talk about it. So I'll let you kick off, Harry, with some residential stuff.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about residential, and in particular units and houses.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 10 years, guys, houses have been outperforming units substantially. So you've got, if you take into consideration the capital growth of houses, if you look at 2015, it's actually the capital growth's gone up by about 130%, which is a massive jump. Whereas if you were to buy a unit back in 2015 for $1 million, let's say, that would have increased by 60% in today's market. So $1 million unit in today's market, on average, in DY in particular, would be worth approximately 1.6 million on average.
So this is just you're talking about in DY in general.
Correct. So this is more in DY. So we're just going to zone in on DY because DY is the best suburb in the Northern Beaches. We're situated at DY. And with housing, again, $1 million property, $1 million house in DY back in 2015 in today's market would be about 2.3 million. In average. So really big, big capital growth there. Really good performance in the last 10 years. And even still going into 2025, now it's only 2 or 3 weeks into the new year, and we're still seeing a lot of high demand, and it's a really tight rental market. There's not too much stock on the market, and there's lots and lots of demand. Mainly in particular, like you'll look at the main suburbs like Manly, Avalon, DY, and the Northern Beaches, they'll always have really strong demand because they're close to the city, they're close to transport, and they're close to the water. Everyone loves the beach. Everyone loves the beach.
Totally. In here, I think people pay some absurd amount of money just to get to see that water, and which I don't blame them for. Like having a good view of the water, beach is kind of always relaxing.
Yeah,
and jump
people
into the
love
water.
The lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
They love the lifestyle. Like that's why they move to the Northern Beaches.
Exactly. You drive by on a weekend, you'll see people walking the dog with their kids, just having a sip of coffee, walking through the beach.
Yeah.
And the most popular walks are along here, like coastal walks. They're very famous for it. So people are just moving here for convenience and lifestyle, basically.
Yeah.
Right? So that was a bit of resi. Commercial, pretty much the same thing. Like if you have a very premium business, you would want it in a very premium suburb, right? You want to target the right market. You don't want to be selling, let's say, what would be the best example? If it's in a full of industrial area, like it's better to have like a footwear for commercial grade, like safety booths and like safety high-vis shops, rather than having a very, very fancier brand in there. So basically, demand versus supply. It's a very old formula, and everyone knows about it and jokes about it. But if you actually think about it, it can change anything, literally the supply versus demand, and what actually causes the capital growth of a property. Doesn't matter residential or commercial. It's the supply and demand.
That's it.
So we did a bit of numbers with DY in particular again, because DY is the best server. So do you want to talk about the units in DY? How many units there were, and how much they were building?
So units in DY. So sorry, so give me the straight question.
All right, easy. So how many units were there in DY? Let's say 5-6 years ago.
So at the moment with units, we've got about 203. We'll talk about rentals. We've got about 203 rentals in today's market as of today. If you go to realestate.com, but even like 5-6 years ago, numbers stock in the northern beaches, it's always been low. It's always been a really, really tight market.
Definitely.
Really tight supply, and really, really strong demand. That's the thing about supply and demand. It's either one's sort of overriding the other, and it's sort of, you're never really finding like a balance between the two. It's always, you're either having really, really low supply and high demand, or it's the other way around.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not there's less apartments in DY. DY has almost 10,000 apartments in total, and there's 200 available for rent in whole of Northern Beaches. So that's that number.
The proportion of those two numbers is very, very scarce.
So that means the demand is very high and the supply is low. And if you have a property there, I think that will give you the best capital growth, and you have a good rental yield as well.
Yeah.
So if you talk about commercial, on the other hand, very same thing. Brookvale, which is a neighboring suburb to DY, is very known for its industrial area. If you have a freehold building there, let's say 1,000 square meter land with a big factory and a bit of a frontage, that will be like a gold mine in Brookvale.
Yeah.
Because Brookvale, being industrial, you can have multiple buildings there at some point. You'll have a very good capital growth. In terms of rental yield, you might struggle a little in terms of a freehold property in Brookvale, because while selling, you get high value. So because it has development potential, your rental yield might be roughly around 3 to 4%.
Yeah.
But let's say you have a shop front in an apartment complex in DY. So let's say if you look at our office, it's like a shop front. So this will have a much better rental yield. You'll get at least 5 to 6% rental yield. But in terms of capital growth, the freehold in Brookvale will have a much better capital growth in let's say 5 to 10 years period. I think. How about Resi?
Yeah.
Is it the same?
Well, look, in Resi, if you look in the last 10 years, what's interesting is that houses and units, the actual yield, if you look in 2015, the average yield for a house was about 3.84% gross, which is what you get. And that's, again, around the DY sort of area. Again, we're using, the same sort of suburbs, just for discussion.
Yep.
3.84% in DY, and that's actually come down quite a bit, because at the moment we're sort of sitting at about the 2.7 mark yield. So we definitely have come down, and again, that's mainly due to that large capital growth that's occurred in the last 10 years, and that's sort of the similar principle with units. They've come down in the last 10 years, which is quite interesting. So Definitely. It's either one's just overriding the other. You can't really get the best of both worlds too often. But yeah, it's the capital growth. Capital growth is just phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. So people often ask me the question. I kind of deal both with resi and commercial. So I was having a chat with this gentleman the other day. Like, if I'm buying investment property, would I rather buy a residential unit or buy a commercial shop?
Ooh.
Both as an investment. So I smiled a little, because that's it's a bit a bit of a controversial topic. Just because you have the money, it's investment anyway. But which one would you pick, resi or commercial? So I gave him the most simple answer. What do you want out of the property?
That's a good one. I like that.
Right. Do you want capital growth, or do you want a good rental return? Do you want cash right now?
Yeah.
Or do you want big cash a bit later?
Yeah. And Bidhan, I just want to ask a question on that. What sort of, is there an influence on the demographic? And what I mean by that is, do you see more elderly people going towards, the commercial properties because they want, they're pushing past 50, 60, they're looking to retire comfortably and they just want more cash on hand, which is what they get from the rent?
Definitely.
Or is it more of the younger sort of generation? Like what sort of demographics choose to buy residential and commercial? That's my question.
Very smart. That's very smart. So going on that, yes. So people who have been investing for a while, they have kind of owned few properties.
Yeah.
I think at the end of upon retirement, they're starting planning.
Yeah.
So there's this term called as piecemeal.
Oh, I like that.
What they do is they want something that will give them constant rental yield.
Income.
So when they retire, they don't have to keep worrying about what's going to happen now. So they have some investment properties that will give them good rental yield. And I say piecemeal because every 2 to 5 years, they can sell one of them.
Yeah.
So they still have a few more, but they can sell that one and enjoy a bit of capital growth, but they have a very good rental yield. So people in a bit closer to retirement, I've seen them investing in commercial properties or residential properties that have very good rental yield. They look for that yield because they need that cash.
And I think another reason, just to add to that point, Bidhan, is that I think when you're pushing 50, 60 and you're looking to retire and you're in that stage where you're slowly starting to live off your superannuation, I think it's a lot more easier to live when you're living off rent coming from your commercial investment property, as opposed to buying a residential unit, which may have a much higher capital growth, but in order to go and buy your groceries from Coles, you can't actually sell the equity.
Exactly.
So you need that instant income, the rent that you get every single week, every fortnight.
So at the end of the day, it's the question again, what do you want out of that property? Because if you're owning a property, you'll always have to see long term because nothing happens in 2 years.
Yeah.
It will grow, but the return won't be the same because you will be paying few extra fees as well. So if you look at a 10-year timeline, what do you want in the 10th year? Do you want a big capital growth, like you have some good chunk of money at the end of the 10 year, or do you want a constant good rental income coming in at the end of the 10 year?
Yeah.
So these are the two things that you have to ask yourself: what do you want out of that property? And if once your want meets, then you have to look for that again supply demand equation.
Yep.
Like you wanna go where everyone wanna go, and that's a very common human nature. You wanna go where there is very very less stock. So DY in particular, I don't think there'll be a big, change in zoning at some point. If you see most of the DY apartments, they're still the red brick ones.
Yeah, they're still like the old ones from the 80s, 90s, around there.
And the commercial ones, they're freestanding commercial ones, but they're all one level. So not a big complex full of shops.
Yeah.
Right. So there are very few of them. So I think DY would be one of the good ones as well to invest. Like even if you want capital growth, like it does 10% almost every year. And we're working here, been very busy with 10,000 apartments in hand. It will keep us on ground.
Yeah.
We have good questions here in Facebook. There's also a speculation that Brookvale is going to gentrification over there. Yes, it's been going on a lot. So Brookvale is most of it's been always commercial, but in the last 5 years, the zoning have changed a little. So few of them, if they're close to the town center, they're changing a lot. So Brookvale's now coming more of a commercial, probably 70 commercial, 30 resi. So the zonings kind of change every 5 years, just because there's shortage of housing. So the government starting to focus, okay, what can we do better? Because they can't just bring out new land out of the blue. So they will have to modify things on the current one. So I think Brookvale will go through some good changes. We're seeing a lot of development happening in Brookvale. So if you are an investor, buying a freehold commercial property right now in Brookvale might be a very good idea because after 5 to 6 years, there will be a big zoning change.
What's a freehold commercial property, Bidhan, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, for sure. So freehold will be anything that the strata is not involved. You own the whole land.
Okay.
So if you're driving by, you see a big, let's say a Toyota dealership by itself. So that's a freehold property. You own the whole land.
Okay.
A strata would be something as a shopping center. Right. Our office. It's in a strata. It's in a big building. There are multiple businesses in there. But a freehold would be. I'm using this photo a lot. So the petrol station at the back. So every petrol station you see, it's a freehold commercial property. So in freehold, you can do whatever you want. Like you can in future, if the zonings are right. So in that petrol pump right behind us, it's in Pittwater Road. So you can build an 8-story high apartment there at some point. You're allowed to. So those are the things. But if it's strata, even if you have to put a wall inside, you have to ask.
You got to go through 50 different. Yeah. You got to go through the body corporate, the whole committee.
So there's pluses and minuses of both. I think overall, I think if you look at strata versus freehold, with freehold, I think you'll get a much better capital gains at the end because the land value is increasing.
Yeah.
But the rental yield is much better on a strata.
Yeah.
Because it's costing less and the rental yield is going up. And also with this new economy, I think with the affordability, 2% interest rate versus 6%, people are going more towards the units, which is strata, because that's what they can afford. Because back in the days when the 2% interest rate, no matter what, people are buying houses.
Yeah.
Because land makes you money. But now with the 6% and 7% interest rate, people are getting a bit tight. What are we doing now? What happens next? So they are, I think, being a bit more careful with the money they're spending and going more towards strata, apartments that are 600, 700, 800. And even as an investment, they will give, like a 2-bedroom unit here would cost 800 grand. Will at least bring 750.
Yeah, around that point.
And that's 5 to 6% rental yield right there. Houses, on the other hand, your median house price here is around 1.9 to 2 mil, and a 3-bedroom house will bring 1,300 in rent.
Yeah, about that 1,300,
1,400.
Yeah. We leased one recently for 1,150. So depending on the area, depending on how close it is to the beach.
Yeah.
Facilities.
Exactly. But in the future, if your house is in the right spot, let's say it's within 400 meters from the town center, has more than 600 square meters of land, you can build a duplex in there, so dual occupancy. So having that, you have more potential for development. So it depends what you're after. So what you want from the property. Do you want a big chunk of money at the end of the 10-year, or do you want constant income coming throughout the whole period? So I think that's the best difference between strata and freehold.
Bidhan, what's your verdict? What's the verdict? Which ones perform better?
It's a tricky question.
It is a tricky question because right now they're actually very, very similar. Yeah. If they commercial and resis are going through very, very. If you look at the numbers, you look at the stats on RP data, they've over the last 10 years, the numbers are very, very similar with each other.
Yeah.
Like in terms of capital growth, rental yields, median price, everything. The numbers are very, very similar.
Very much.
Yeah. I'm gonna go resi just because I'm in resi.
Resi, interesting. I find both better because I've seen some depends which one you pick.
Yeah. Depends who you are. As well.
Exactly. I've seen some commercial property that are in strata perform very well. I've sold properties that made people 50 to 60% growth in 3 years in a commercial property.
Wow.
Right, but it's same people at the same time might have bought something else in a different location, and they didn't make much. So
we've got some comments here.
Flavio. Hey, Flavio.
Hi, Flavio. Diversification
that's
is key. Mix of commercial and residential.
Everyone says
don't diversification is key. That's actually a very good point. Depending on your financial circumstance, if you're in a position where you can have a large property portfolio,
exactly.
I could not agree more. I would definitely recommend diversifying commercial, residential. You're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting your rental yield on one side, and then you're getting your capital growth on one side.
So you're secured both ways. Exactly.
So you've got your short-term, long-term benefits, which is really good.
Like in the saying goes, don't keep all the eggs in the same basket.
Yeah.
Always diversify. Yeah, exactly. So I think Mark was saying no matter what happens with as time goes on, the old fundamentals don't change.
Yeah.
It's always the same.
The property market in the last 100 years will always increase, and the property market in the next 100 years will increase as well.
Definitely. And at the end of the day, prices are always going up. It's always a good time to buy, and it's always a good time to sell.
Yeah.
So it's all about what you want out of that property. And I think Flavio mentioned a good point here. So with commercial and residential in terms of tenancy, how we chatted earlier. So with commercial, I've seen some properties get astronomical rental returns. Why? Because it takes a while to find a commercial tenant, but when they're in there, they're locked in. Like you see shops at a spot for like 5, 10, 15 years. And commercial property have a fixed growth every year. So it's in the tenancy. So let's say a property is paying 50 grand a year. Next year, if it's 5% rent increase, it's going to be 52.
Yeah.
So over the 10-year period, the compounding is going to be crazy. So by the end of a 5-year lease, they might be paying a much higher rent. But with resi, it's the tenant can move it every year.
Yeah.
Right. Tenant can move it every year, and it all listens to the market. Whatever the market's doing, like you might have a tenant that might stay there for 5, 6 years, or they might change because life changes. People are single, get married, have kids. The circumstances change, different job.
Yeah.
So, but with commercial, if it's a shop or an office, they have to pay for the fit out, so they invested themselves. Like if you see a cafe, the coffee machines, the bars, the grease traps, it's a lot of investment. So they're locked in for 4 to 5 years. So once you have a commercial property, you have that rent coming in for sure. So it's again, what do you want out of that property? Like, what is your end goal?
So I think we've covered
I think we've covered everything. We definitely
smashed it, I think.
Don't want to take a long time. But at the end of the day, always keep diverse. Take a lot of suggestions from different people, and we're always here to help. Like if you want to give us a call and say, "Hey, this is what I want out of a property. Do you have anything in mind? What's the best way?" And
if you are unsure, guys, look at the numbers. Look at what the numbers have done in commercial and resis, in houses, in units. Look at what the numbers have done in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
In today's market, in 2025, we're 3 weeks into the new year. And that will help you make a better decision if you are looking to invest or buy your first property, or whether it's one to add to the collection. It's really, really, really useful to look at the numbers, look at the stats, and see how the property market's been performing the last 1 year, 3 year, 10 years, 50 years.
All right, last question before we end it. You have $1.5 million.
Oh, here we go.
All right. What are you buying and why? Okay, which suburb and why?
I'm buying in DY.
I saw that coming.
Buying in DY. I'm gonna probably buy a 2-bedder. I'm buying a 2-bedder, probably rent it out beautifully for $800, $850 a week.
Yeah.
And even though the yield won't be too high on that, and then just sit back on my chair, relax, and enjoy my capital growth.
That's great.
Simple answer.
All right. That was a great time, and have a good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you,
everyone, and we'll see you next Monday.
Night. See you later, guys. Enjoy.